everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you so much for attending today's skills workshop, Sealing the Deal in APAC, which is actually the last installment of our very first series of skills workshops as part of the UK APAC Tech Growth Programme on doing business in APAC. So, my name is Polly. I'll be your host today, and I'm based in the Intralink London office. As I mentioned, today's workshop is part of the UK APAC Tech Growth Programme, which I'll briefly talk about. So this is an initiative that we're running on behalf of the UK government, DBT and DSIT, which aims to help innovative UK startups and scale-ups to expand or just find out a little bit more about doing business in the APAC region. So workshops is actually just one of the things that we offer as part of the programme. We also do one-on-one consultations, pitch events, and even in-country business development initiatives. So I've just put the QR code up here for you to scan if you're interested, or you can go to the website there and you can find out more and even sign up yourselves. So now onto the exciting stuff, sealing the deal in APAC. So you might have everything lined up, great product, resources to spend on expansion, a well thought out business model, so on and so forth. But this won't mean much if you can't close your first groundbreaking deal in Asia. So today's format will be a discussion with some of our experts from our on-the-ground teams in Asia, specifically Taiwan, Japan, and Korea. So we're going to start off with some quick-fire questions, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the pre-deal, mid-deal, and all the way up to the post-deal stages. Plus, at the end, there'll be a Q&A, so feel free in the Q&A function at any time throughout the workshop, and then we'll answer them at the end. Now, our guests are going to introduce themselves. So first up, I would like Zhao Le to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Zhao Le. I go by Zhao. I've been working with Intralink for more than 15 years, and great to be here.
Thanks, Zhao. Next up, we have Will Jaspriza.
Hi, everybody. I'm Will Jaspriza. I'm the Managing Director of our Tokyo office. Originally from Australia, I've been in Japan for 26 years and with Intralink for 16. Looking forward to this discussion.
Great, thanks, Will. And finally, we have Alexandra Gugai.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Gugai, and I'm a project director based in Intralink Korea office. For the past 5 years, I've been mainly working in software, cloud, AI, and quantum space, and I'm looking forward to share our stories on sealing the deal in Asia.
Great, thanks, guys. Right, let's get into the nitty-gritty now. So, starting off with some rapid-fire questions. I'm going to come straight out with it. What's the lowest number of meetings it's ever taken to seal a deal? Will, can you go first?
2 or 3.
2 or 3, okay.
Very rare. But...
Jill, can you beat that?
2.
Okay. Alexandra?
Oh, I think I can beat that. I would say 1. It was a love at first sight type of a deal.
Wow. That's cool. Okay, great. And then on the flip side of that, what's the highest number of meetings it's ever taken, Alexandra?
Oh, that's hard to count. I think in terms of period, maybe it took us around 18 months to close first deal for our software client.
Okay, so that's kind of countless then. Zhao?
Yeah, lose count, 2.5 years.
Oh, gosh. Okay, that's a long-term relationship right there. Will, how about you?
I feel I'm one-upping, but I think 3 years. I was in the telco space, so can't count the number of meetings. That was a long one.
Okay, and then finally, your most successful cold call. Zhao, how about you?
Cold call. One cold call leads to one face-to-face meeting and then leads to the deal.
Okay. Well,
So way back in the 2000s, when I was a newbie here, I rang an R&D center at a pharmaceutical company and asked for a process chemist, got him on the phone, and managed to convince him to give me a meeting. And that became a deal for a US biotech company we were representing. We're still in touch. I saw him the other month. So yeah.
right. Okay. So let's not underestimate the power of a cold call, right, Alexandra?
I might sound a little bit cheesy. I think every cold call is a successful call. It either brings us a deal or gives us the market feedback.
Wow, love it. Okay, great. I mean, obviously, there's much more to doing a deal than a cold call, but it's a good place to start, isn't it? Okay, great. Thanks so much, guys. So now going a bit further into the deal. So, well, actually, sorry, right at the beginning of the deal. Let's start there. So, right when we first meet the corporate that we're trying to sell to in Asia, how do we make a good first impression? Alexandra, can you start off for us?
Maybe I'll start with a short story. I remember a few years ago, we secured a meeting with Samsung Electronics corporate innovation team, looking to license our client's technology. And our client, the CEO of the Western company, gave a 14 minutes pitch about how the company was founded, how technology has been developed, and how relevant his team to this industry, which led us to a huge misunderstanding. We ended up meeting Samsung's investing arm, they assumed that we were looking for investment. In general, I think it wasn't bad to have contacts at the investment team, but I guess the moral from the story, I think in Korea it's important to make an impactful impression with a concise, tailored pitch that directs conversation around customers' needs and their pain points. I think it's important to not pitch like you're trying to secure funding from a venture capital. It's better to avoid lengthy personal introductions. So I would say to make the best first impression, it's important to tailor your pitch, make it about your customers, with the focus on how the technology can help them and how they can benefit from it.
Definitely great. So yeah, let's not focus on ourselves too much, guys, right? However amazing you may be, when you're talking to one of the biggest corporates in whichever country you're targeting, you don't want to talk too much about yourself. Great. Thanks, Alexandra. Zhao, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Alexander on the first meeting. If you do get a face-to-face first meeting, you've got to come prepared. And we obviously help our client to prepare for the first meeting. So you come off your first call, or if it's a warm contact, you talk to them and then find out what they need and then find out what your client actually can provide. And I can give you an example. Once we were trying to sell to HTC, this is a long time ago, HTC, and our client gave us a presentation deck about the solution. And then we realized that we can break down the solution to smaller portions so we can approach various business units. So when we presented the specific breakdown of the solution to the specific business unit, they were quite happy with the efficiency we brought to them. Yeah.
Great. So I guess that's not just specific to Taiwan, right? It's really good to have a very tailored pitch and presentation. Will, how about in Japan? Would you agree?
I would agree. I'd piggyback onto something Alexandra said. Don't talk about yourself too much, but you should give some background. Sometimes people dive into their solution, what it is they're providing, without actually talking about the company that they represent. And the other side might want to know, it's helpful to them to know that you're a small, strappy, startup, because that's part of the story that you're presenting to them. But yeah, not spend 30 minutes on it, but also have a game plan for the meeting. Don't just go in, oh, it's a meeting with so-and-so. You need to know what you want to walk away with at the end of that meeting, and assign roles. Who's checking time? Who's actually taking notes? Who's making sure that you walk out of that room? It's very basic stuff, but you'd be surprised, or maybe not be surprised, at the number of times it doesn't happen.
Great. Thanks, Will. So you mentioned, doing your research beforehand and being really prepared. And I think this ties well into this issue that a lot of startups and scale-ups from the Western side of the world face when they try and sell into these huge conglomerates, which is quite the power imbalance, right? So however good your tech might be, when you're facing a tech giant, it's kind of hard to persuade them that they need you, right? So what do you guys say is the best way of mitigating this power imbalance between the tech firm and the large conglomerate?
Do your homework, be prepared. So I'll give an example. We had one of our researchers actually dug up a paper that one of the target companies had published, looked into it, saw what software they were using to do the particular work, and went, oh, actually, our client's software can do a much better job. So we went into the meeting. Well, first of all, we contacted them and said, we've read your paper, we can help you. So we didn't just walk in and give a standard pitch. It was very tailored. We'd identified a specific problem, and that company became one of the first customers for that client. A very large company, I won't mention any names, and it was a startup from the US that won the business.
Great. That's funny. You remind me of a story of when I was at a pitch with a British startup and a Korean corporate, sorry. And one of the members of the Korean corporate said, your tech is great, but I've just read this paper where someone else already did it like 5 years ago. And he was like, that was my paper. So that definitely impressed them. Alexandra, do you have anything to add in Korea?
I would say it's pretty much saying what Will mentioned. I think it's connected to our previous point about tailoring your pitch. It sets the tone. I think when you meet for the first time with conglomerates, it shows a strong background research that you've done on them. And actually, while doing that research, we often find some flaws to fix. So it's a good tool, I would say, to balance the power with a bigger fish.
Great. And Jaula, how about in Taiwan?
Taiwan might be a little bit different. We don't deal with conglomerates that often, and there are large companies, but they're not as powerful. And I think we adapt the same approach, come prepared. And then before you actually go into the face-to-face meeting, you discuss what you want to talk about and whether you've identified the right person to talk to. And then that's, I think, what we want to do.
Yeah, great. So you mentioned, finding the right person to talk to. And I think this is definitely something important to think about. So let's go more deep into this. Who do you guys think is the most important to be friendly with within an organization, and how can you use this to your advantage? Alexandra, can you start us off with Korea?
I think most of our clients, they aim to speak to C-level too quickly. And while I agree on the fact that, of course, C-level, they are decision makers, there is always a chance that decision might not be in the client's favor. I'm a strong believer that valuable conversations within the organization in Korea is quite a key factor when you try to seal the deal. And I guess finding those influencers, someone who will fight your corner when negotiating with higher ups, it's quite important. So I think one of the recent deals we've closed is a great example to this point. The VP of a Korean corporate already knew about the technology that our client had tried to license before, but for some reason that VP had a wrong idea about the value proposition, which put obviously the whole conversation on hold. So we reached out to the product team of that company. We suggested that, we have new updates on the technologies that we would like to share. And eventually we met and we we built together strong value proposition, tailoring that specific technology to their needs. And eventually the team presented to the same VP, who obviously gave a green light, and we did end up signing a multi-year contract, licensing that technology into their operational system.
Great. So yeah, never underestimate the technical team, right? Will, I remember you telling me about a good story to do with the technical team and how they helped you out.
Indeed. And I think rather than just never underestimate the technical team, we'd advise going in at the technical level first. If you're lucky, you can identify a champion within the technical group. Otherwise, you might have to hunt a bit higher. But in Japan, if you haven't won over the technical people, you're not going to typically get the sign-off higher up. And there are other benefits to engaging. So I'll relate the anecdote. It was in the film coating space, and we've been having technical evaluations with the technical team. They love the technology. They wanted to move ahead. We had a champion, and we'd gotten to the point where we needed to talk to procurement. And just before we spoke to procurement, the champion came over and whispered, you need to add 10% to the price, because our procurement department always wants to knock 10% off the price. And that may sound counterintuitive. Why are you not acting against the interests of the company? No, that technical department wanted the technology. It would be a win for them. And if procurement got their discount, it's a win from them. And we got the deal. So having that good relationship with those technical people meant that the deal went through smoothly.
Yeah, it's definitely important to make sure you're, not putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Spreading them out amongst the organization. Zhao, you said earlier that actually in Taiwan it's a little bit different to Japan and Korea, with this system of, in Korea, chaebol and obviously keiretsu. Is that right, Will?
Yes.
In Japan. So in Taiwan, I guess the corporate structure is maybe a little bit different. So what's your opinion on how you tackle that, and where's the most important to start?
Yeah, sure. So C-level is fine, but I think based on my experience, especially the most recent experiences in 2002, 2003, and 2004, I had a look back of all the projects and the deals we've concluded. It's all done on the working level. It's including the upsell of licensing seats. So I agree with Phil. The champion actually works more efficient on when you want to close deals with the company, because they are the users and they want to become more efficient and they want to produce new products, and then they'll help you to help them. So that's Taiwan experience. And I have another example to give you. There was one deal we discussed with the person who actually wanted our service, and she, by the end of the meeting, she actually threw over one comment, and she says, our purchase calls, don't worry about it. And then I didn't realize what that means, but by 7 o'clock, when the purchase department person calls, and he wanted a discount. And I was like, what? We have agreed the price. And then I remember that she said, don't worry. And I said, no, this is the bottom line, and we've already done the negotiation. We can't give you any discount. And after 10 minutes of back and forth, and he said, what about 1% off? I said, okay. So the next day we got the invoice. We got the PO. So that's the beauty of talking to everyone and going towards closing the deal.
Right. Okay. Amazing. Thank you. So thanks for that, guys. I feel like that kind of leads us on to what we might call the mid-deal. So we've done our initial pitch. We've made a good first impression. We've figured out who it is we want to talk to. I mean, obviously, we talked about where that leads to at the end of the deal, but that's quite important, identifying at the beginning exactly where we want to start talking to people. So now we've kind of met and made a good impression with these people. We want to build a good relationship, right? And I guess it's kind of a well-known thing, well, at least within the circles that I exist in, to do with Asian business. It's a well-known thing that you need to focus on relationship building when you're trying to do a deal in any of the East Asian countries. So let's talk about what extent this plays a role and how can you use this to your advantage. Zhao, I'd like you to start, please.
Sure. Talking about building relationships, that's what we try, and because this is a business and it's people's business, so we always put a lot of emphasis on building the relationship. Apart from the 1 or 2 meeting concluding a deal, typically we go through 5-6 meetings towards the end of the closing a deal. So during this, after the initial meeting, starting from 2nd meeting, 3rd meeting, we try to go beyond technical discussions, business terms and conditions, negotiations. We try to bring them bubble tea or try to bring them to lunch, working lunch, even though we pay for ourselves, but talking while having lunch, asking what their preference about bubble tea, really build the relationship, and then you understand some of the people, you like them, you want to stay close with them, and they will be in the industry, and then they are the champion maybe in the deal you are discussing with. So back to the HTC examples, we started with one business unit. After a couple of meetings, they actually referred us to another business unit, and then we ended up actually talking to multiple business units about the solution, not the same solution, but very similar solution we can provide, help them to solve the problem. So it actually did lead to a deal, but not all lead to deals. Still, we believe the relationship building during the talking and lunch facilitated a lot of this.
And when you talk about lunch, do you talk business like during the lunch, or do you kind of avoid that and just focus on a more personal level?
Best topics, inflation, economics, housing prices, that kind of things. We don't stay just on the technology or the business we discuss about. Yeah.
And how about dinner?
We don't push for dinner. Maybe that's for a multi-million-dollar deal after signing ceremony celebration, but I think lunch is just right.
And Will, how about Japan? What does dinner signify in Japan?
I'd agree with Zhao. Once you've done the deal, go out to dinner. Otherwise, it's getting ahead of yourself. We're working, mostly with startups, scale-ups, SMEs, and with very technical solutions, products. So we're focused on typically the technical teams. And when you say forming a relationship, it's really how do they like working with you to get through the technical evaluation. So it's not relationship as in how are your kids doing. It's a relationship in the sense of, are you responding to my queries? Are you giving the answers in time? When you say you're going to provide an upgrade or an update by a certain point, that you follow through and do that. That's the relationship you're building, because the short-term view is, oh, it's this deal that we're aiming at. But the long-term view is you form a good relationship. It's the deal after that, the deal after that, and the deal after that. So in Japan, I'm thinking more of the relationship building in those terms. You want to be a good partner to work with.
So it's about trust, right? Trust that you're not going to mess them over later, or
I'll give you a slightly weird example. You need to know that you're going to go really deep into some technical aspects, and you need to, I guess, set the client's expectations for that. We had one POC in which So it was a benchmark. If this POC succeeded, then we're probably going to move towards a bigger deal. The result of the first benchmark was the customer software just didn't work. It couldn't do the calculation. The client software could. So you'd assume, oh, done deal, right? We win. No. The criteria as set by the Japanese customer was that we had to show that we were faster than their software. So if their software hadn't worked, we didn't have a speed to measure it against. They redid it until they got their software to work, at which point it was clear that our client software was much faster. Benchmark done, POC attained, and we moved on to a deal. But we had to convince the client, you need to work with it. You can't push and say, that's ridiculous. It's going to take another month, but we got there. And that's the relationship building that we do.
Right. So, there's only so far that like knowing the best sushi place near the office will get you. You also have to prove it through building trust. So Alexandra, and having obviously, you've got to have a good product, right?
Yeah, you can know many, many great sushi restaurants, but if your stuff doesn't work and it doesn't do what it says, what you say it does,
yeah. Alexandra, I'm wondering how the process is kind of similar or different in Korea in your experience.
I would say slightly different. I think the first impression when introducing products or services matters the most. And how do we know if you had a good impression or not? Unlike Taiwan, Korean companies will take you for lunch and they buy you bubble teas and coffees. So it's a good sign, means they are actually interested and they would like to continue conversation further. And obviously, building a good relationship with one team might lead to an introduction to other teams and divisions. And when it comes to a specific organization, let's say, it helped us a lot to create that buzz around the technology. So we've seen many times, if more people talk about the technology, it brings us slightly closer to a deal stage. So yeah, I think definitely building relationship not only with one team, but with any division that is somehow relevant to your deal process is really crucial to eventually close the deal.
Great, yeah. And I guess, however good your relationship may be with one or many of the teams, there's always going to be misunderstandings that happen, right? If we're dealing with very different business cultures. So I'm wondering about some examples of miscommunications and how this affected the deal and how this maybe could have been not mitigated, but, for our viewers, knowing that this actually means this, right? So often I hear, especially in the case of Japan, people say one thing but mean the other. But Will, I guess, do you think it's really saying one thing and meaning the other, or just you don't know what they mean, right?
Yeah, it's the latter. So one expression when translated is, oh, that's difficult. But anyone who lives in Japan knows that means no. But if you've got an interpreter who just says, oh, they said that's difficult, then the client might go, right, so what do we need to do to turn that difficult into a yes? No, that's a no. So you need to work out why it's a no. That's a very, I guess, simple example. I'll give you a more complicated example. Way back, we had a client working in the telco space, and they borrowed some SIM cards to do testing on devices. Now, this is a big thing because the use of mobile devices is heavily regulated. When it came to returning the 30 SIM cards, there were only 28. And the client was like, oh, yeah, something happened to 2 of them. All right. We had to go down and apologize in person to the partner company, basically bow and scrape, because at this end, that's a massive thing. It's a betrayal of trust in a sense. They could get in trouble. So that's the kind of situation where you need to know the difference between, oh, it's just we're only late a day, or we're only missing 2, and what it actually means at the other end. In the end, it was fine. We still managed to close the deal, but that was a hiccup that we could have done without.
What would you say the moral of that story is? That we should...
Really, in that case, we should have educated the client better and said, look, there's a reason they've given us a list with the numbers. It's so that you can check every day that you've got all the numbers on the list and hand them all back. So in that sense, it was our failure.
Right, yeah. I mean,
We've learnt. That was a while ago.
okay, that's the learning point. Great. So, Zhao, do you have any kind of examples springing to mind of where miscommunications have happened and how you've managed to get around?
Yeah, so I have to agree with Will's comment. It's very common when I think it's one of the most common when we come across when people say, I don't think it's intentional, but when people say it's the comment is, oh, this is difficult to change. It's difficult to change the configuration. And then because they all say speak English, and you just went, oh, this, well, how can we help you to change it to make it not difficult? But actually it means they are not willing to change the configuration. Let's work towards how to adapt to it. That's the logic behind it. It's more like a lost in translation kind of thing. Other from that, I think in Taiwan, because a lot of people speak English and they are educated in Europe or in the US, they understand the culture and they're quite forgiving. So it's in this sense, it's easier.
Right, okay, yeah. So when we say, this is difficult on its own, that's kind of means something, no. But if the potential customer goes even further to offer really quite negative feedback, would you see that as something off-putting, or actually, that might show that the client cares a little bit more, not the client, sorry, the customer cares a little bit more about finding how they can solve these issues for their own use? Would you agree with that, Zhao?
No question is a bad thing. Lots of questions and difficult questions is actually a good thing. It means they are thinking about how to adapt to your technology or how to utilize your solution. And that's my experience. Yeah.
It's the same in Japan, right, Will?
Yeah, I'd agree. Negative feedback could mean, look, your tech doesn't do this, but if you can get it to do this, we'd be very interested, or we're already kind of interested, but you can seal the deal if you can get it to do this. So negative feedback is good. The worst situation is a meeting where there's just nothing coming from the other side.
Yeah.
So we welcome negative feedback.
And finally, Alexandra, I'm interested in how, reading between the lines, how much that plays a part in career, or is that not such a thing?
Yeah, I'll have to disagree slightly with Will and Zhao. I think in Korea it's slightly different. If a customer gives us a very vague and slightly negative reaction or feedback, it might not necessarily mean no. It's important to, as you mentioned, probably read between the lines. Sometimes there's so many details and hints a Korean customer might just drop here and there. And these are definitely a great sign of please convince me I'm wrong, or please help me out with solving my problems. There are many examples, to be honest, to this point, but maybe one of the most recent one was when we approached this Korean logistics company introducing a new warehouse management system. And initially they came back to us saying with 10 reasons why it's not going to work. It's technically just not right for them. And that feedback was so crucial, as our client could leverage that and better tailor the offering. So we did end up securing a POC with multiple other local SI partners who supported the project. So yeah, I would say it's slightly different here comparing to Japan and Taiwan.
Interesting. Yeah. I guess in my experience, the example that's springing to mind the most is regarding the negative feedback, or kind of the incessant feedback, let's say. I remember being in a meeting where a large Korean corporate was asking one of our clients a lot of questions, and in quite a scary way. Actually, there was one guy this was an online meeting, he'd spent the whole time with his camera off, and all of a sudden his camera comes on and his eyes are like that, and he's like, how can you make this work for us? And obviously this must have been a bit intimidating, but I knew This is a good sign. He cares.
Yes, he cares.
So now I just want to talk about basically once we get to the point of the deal where maybe things start slowing down a bit. So I think this is something that happens quite a lot where you're on a roll or the roll of the deal and you think finally this is going to go through, and then all of a sudden, you know, radio silence. What's going on? We've sent or given them the technology to have a go with, to try it out, see if they can integrate it, see if it works, a kind of trial, and then nothing. So, Will, I want to ask you first because I've heard of the infamous Lingi. Is that how we say? Which is actually, can you explain it for us, please?
It's just a decision-making process where you don't just have one person who's signing off. You would have everybody from the section chief up to the department chief to the division chief, maybe up to exec level, depending on how big the deal is, actually having to, it used to be an actual physical stamp, but thanks to COVID, a lot of that's moved electronically, but it still takes time because each person actually has to do it. So whilst you may turn around an NDA in the West in a week or two, we'll tell clients it's going to take a month, typically, but we'll also ask, we'll say, how long does your legal department typically take to turn these things around? First goes through legal and then it has to get signed. So it could be a month and then another month. Set expectations. You're not going to change that. It has gone a little bit faster in the last few years.
That's good.
A month, things can happen in a month. It's amazing.
Are people moving away from the red stamp, or is that still a thing?
They are, but it's still a thing.
Okay. Yeah, for context, sorry, did you mention the red stamp earlier?
Yeah, it used to be a physical stamp.
Yeah. So Alexandra and Zhao, does it also take a long time in Korea and Taiwan, would you say? Zhao, how about you first?
Sure. Yes, chops, we call it chops or stamps, still a thing. And most recently, I've been dealing with smaller companies, so it makes it much easier. They go away, and then our internal champion will help us to go through the process and get things chopped. So in the recent 24 months, I've not gone through radio silence. So fingers crossed, no radio silence. So I guess I can say I'm a bit luckier.
How about you, Alexandra? What's your experience in Korea?
Yeah, pretty much same. It takes longer as most of the times there are many teams internally that need to sign and put the red stamp on the whole decision-making process. So I think, again, finding your champion who can push internally all the teams to do a quicker review will help. But yeah, patience is also the key.
Patience, but also nudging, right?
Nudging. Polly, if I may, there was a comment made by one of our partner companies the other day, and it was that startups are pitchers and Japanese corporates are catchers. And pitchers should understand how catchers think if they want them to actually do anything with the pitch when it lands there. So part of our job, because our clients are startups and scale-ups and SMEs, is educating them on how long it's going to take, but also how can we move it faster? So if we use their format for the NDA, for the MOU, is that going to be faster? What can we do? And not just throw the pitch and leave it. Help the catcher move it faster.
Great. Yeah. Okay, so I like this metaphor of the ball. So let's imagine that the ball is like racing towards a home run, and we're on the home stretch of the deal. But can there be such a thing as a home stretch when you have a whole future ahead of hopefully a very good relationship with this company? So I'm wondering, what are the most important things you can do to nurture a good relationship post deal, and what can you do, you know, before the name is signed on the dotted line? What can you do to ensure that this will be a good relationship that will continue to be beneficial? Alexandra, what would you say? in Korea?
Yeah, I think I would say in Korea, it's important to assure your customers that you are going to look after them even after the deal is signed. So integrating this part into the contract itself helps to portray that commitment. We have licensed energy management system into a Korean factory a few years ago. And as part of the agreement was we scheduled actually monthly meeting with the end users of that platform that required us to visit factory monthly. So just holding a monthly meeting with that customer allowed us to hear the feedback, increase the usage of that platform, and eventually we actually could even upsell new functions and services on top of what we already sold. So yeah, I think the commitment of looking after your customers when you're signing the deal is quite crucial in Korea.
Yeah.
It's the same for Japan. And even if it's a product that's not a physical product, like in the old days, as we say, you'd have engineers going on site. Now it may be a software product. So you can set up a Slack channel, which is the technical support channel dedicated to that customer. And then the client support team sees a message come in from whatever company it is and can respond immediately. The fact that it's written means that communication can be easier than spoken communication. And that means that you don't have to be in the same time zone. The US can pick up the message when they wake up in the morning. But providing that ongoing support, I think, is crucial if you want to make that relationship work, and then open the door to have that team introduce you to the next team.
Right, yeah. So you can kind of use that relationship going forward with other departments, right? Zhao,
Yeah.
would you say that's something that can help with upselling in Taiwan?
Upselling. It's very, very important. Some of our clients, they are in the IP licensing industry, and upselling is very crucial part of increasing revenues. So by not committing the technical team back in Europe to support them on queries, and if we can support in a timely manner, for example, if they want to pull a 2000 SDP comparison out of the database and they couldn't get the criteria right, and then we can be online and support them instantly. It means they can produce a report to their CEO on this certain SCP within a very short period of time to prove that our IP license software works. And then the next year they'll budget more seats and key so we can upsell. So that's very important for us.
Great. And the final thing I just want to touch on is NREs. And are these sort of expected part of the contract? Will?
So I think that was a conversation we had the other day in which it was about how to structure the contract. So this was in the automotive space, selling into a tier one. Conversations have gone well. Technical evaluation was completed. The issue was that as we were nutting out the actual details of the contract, the feedback was, you've got a chunk of money assigned as an IP license, but the company policy was, as the customer very bluntly told us, it's kind of paying for something that we can't see. So can you anyway restructure the contract so that the support, in this case, turn it into NRE and then reduce the license fee, basically so procurement can swallow it. And we were able to do that, and the deal went through. But if we hadn't had that conversation, it could have been a stalemate. And of course, the client was good enough to be flexible and recognize that this was crucial to get the deal through.
Great. So being flexible and making sure you integrate this post-deal support into the contract and establishing that trust with the client. Great. Thanks so much, guys. So we're on 10:15 now, or 10:15 here, not 10:15 for you guys, a bit later than that. I'd love to get into some questions from the audience. This has been really fascinating so far, and let's see what we've got. So we've got one question here. Greetings. Thank you for the time and effort. I am curious about the region culture-specific strategies to negotiating the terms of a deal for Intralink. What are some differences between how sides approach negotiations, and how do you adapt to cases where the results exceed expectations or underperform? Alexandra, do you think you could start us off?
Oh, that's a tough question. Yeah, I think there are a few things to keep in mind when it comes to negotiating in Korea. I'll start maybe with the concept we have in Korea, which is kapkwa-ul. Basically, it means the strong side and yield side, and it's really, I would say, important for Korean companies to feel like they are on the stronger side. They are the one who've got the power, and they are the one who will benefit from the contract. I know it might sound like a not great strategy for negotiating, but I'll give you an example. I think a few years ago when we tried to license this SaaS platform, it had the annual fee. And back then, a lot of Korean companies just didn't like the concept of paying, as Will mentioned something, paying upfront for something they're not sure it's going to work. So basically, there was, I think, 2 months of negotiating how we're going to structure that price model. And then we literally just offered the Korean company to change that annual SaaS fee to a monthly fee. So important point that we didn't change the price at all. If it was 120,000, we just made 12,000 per month fee. And just the fact that Korean company felt like we, let them take over, and they're the one benefiting by this price structure. They signed the deal right away. So yeah, it's one of the examples again that portrays the importance of making Korean companies feel like they are the one actually benefiting from the contract. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So it's important in securing a win-win deal, right? You don't want anyone to feel like they're losing out here, regardless of how much money is actually exchanged. Zhao, do you have anything to add for Taiwan?
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's very similar in a negotiation leading towards signing a deal. Is always we need to psychologically make people feel that make the customer feel that they are actually winning, and we give in to some of their terms. So we will have to be creative on lots of the terms. If we don't want to give in on the final big total number, the revenue that we want to get to. So be flexible is part of the negotiation. A lot of times, Taiwan companies are open, and the structure is kind of flat. So they're not very fussy about other things, but you give in to smaller discount is probably something key towards closing the deal.
Great, thank you. And Will, do you have anything to add for Japan?
I think it's all pretty much been covered. I'd recognise, I think every company has its playbook for negotiations, and probably behooves you to study it a bit if you can, or at least talk to people and work out what you're likely to encounter when you're entering into a negotiation with that company. Might be easier said than done, but
yeah. Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. And then we've got another question here now. Very interesting. Thank you. You're welcome. Can you talk about pricing and amounts people are willing to pay in each country? How does it compare to the UK? Ooh, good question. Jiaole, can you start us off?
A lot of the deals we've done in the past 24 months are not price sensitive at all. Taiwanese companies, especially nowadays, they're very proactive, trying to cooperate with US and European companies. They want to be reaching out to be part of the technology platform. So they look at what we provide to benchmark what we provide in our home countries. So price isn't a big deal or big issue. We have to explain the quality of the service or the solution, and then they will accept.
Alexandra, how have you found it in Korea?
I think it's different depending on the industry, but lately a lot of Korean companies they will ask for price benchmark. For example, they would ask us what's the price for your technology in certain markets. So just they don't want to be sure that Western companies do not try to oversell their technologies here. So we've been actually practicing this lately a lot. We create some sort of price benchmark, and sometimes what we have to do, we have to explain why that certain price is sometimes a little bit more expensive than competitor price. And I think our team in Korea, they've been doing a great job by doing intensive research on what competitors do and how our clients' technology can maybe overperform in certain areas. And I think the problem is not that Korean companies might not have a budget. I think they just really need to feel like everything has been compared, everything has been explained properly. So we did close few deals with a higher price than maybe the market average. But again, we need to put a lot of effort, and thanks to our clients who were also cooperative in terms of providing that information. That was quite helpful to seal a few deals recently.
Great, thank you. And finally, Will, what's the situation in Japan?
I think price is pretty much always an issue here. It's going to come down to which industry you're talking to. I mean, in automotive, if what you're selling is then going to end up in millions of cars, then that's a different proposition to selling it once into a company. So your mileage will vary. I see a lot of deals around the $5,000-$10,000 for initial proof of concept. More recently, sort of 50,000-80,000, even at the POC level, but that'd be more on, say, manufacturing side. Pharmaceuticals tend to be the lower initial PSC value, but then again, it could be a much bigger deal down the road. I think it's hard to precisely generalize.
Great. Okay, thank you. And next, we have some time I quite like this question actually, which is about your very first deals that you ever sealed way back when. So what are some things you had to adjust to, and what aspects of your own personal experiences contributed most to your success? So yeah, right back at the beginning, I guess, what was that like? Well, do you have...
We were sent on a negotiation course, which was, I can't remember how long ago it was, but fortuitously, there was negotiation a few months after that, and it was tough. And the other side, they definitely had a playbook. But I remember, even though there were, I think, several mistakes along the way, stuck with what we'd learned on the course and closed a deal. I think it was around 300K USD. It was in the automotive space. It was hard, but then that feeling of achieving it, and the client was like, here are the strictures, you can reach an agreement between this number and this number. That was a pretty good feeling as a young business development executive.
Great, thanks. And Zhao, do you have any fond memories of your first deal sealed?
This very interesting question, and I've not thought about it. I don't even remember when the first deal was. But it's been so long, and things actually change. I actually did feel the change, but what's not changed prior or post-COVID, I think face-to-face meeting is still important. If you sit down with whoever you are selling to and then reason your reason and stick to the price and give in on other terms, and you'll get your deal. Or obviously you have a good product and then they want your product. Yeah.
Maybe you'll remember, like, as soon as the workshop ends, you'll be like, oh, of course. Alexandra?
I would say 5 years ago, 5 years ago, I've been working with the client, and the product was cloud-based SaaS solution. And so it sounds very fancy, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people will be familiar with this. But 5 years ago in Korea, it's quite surprising, but lots of corporates were not comfortable with name SaaS. We had to explain what software as a service means. And then we had to explain how cloud works, like how come there's no hardware needed, but we can use the software. And the third thing is it had some AI analytics functions. So we had to explain how AI works and machine learning and all the technologies that are quite great now in Korea. 5 years were not actually in a place where now we can see a lot of, again, Korean companies using SaaS products. So 5 years ago, we had to go through this education phase where we eventually, every meeting would be like the topic of, each of the technologies. And eventually we'll try to explain the product. So it took us around, I think, 14 months to close the first deal for that client. But I think, and thankfully, our client was quite aware of Korean market, that it's not ready yet for some cloud-based technologies. But when eventually we closed that first deal, it opened so many doors to other companies, and obviously it became a great use case for us.
So what you're telling me is you guys brought SaaS to Korea?
I think so.
Amazing. Okay. Right. Well, I think we're almost out of time, but that was really fascinating. Thank you so much, guys. It's been so much fun for me to talk to you, and I hope that everyone else has had an enjoyable time. Just before we go, I'm just going to put up this information again about the Tech Growth Program. So yes, don't hesitate to give this a scan, sign up, or just send me at the top or our program manager, Tom Miller, an email about something you might be interested in to do with the APAC region. We're always here to talk, and we can help you seal the deal. So hope you all have a lovely morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are, and thanks so much for coming. See you next time.